sidewalks that go right up to the school and cover most of the community. But I would say to the member opposite that it is the municipality's responsibility, and as a member of the Legislative Assembly, we all have a duty to our constituencies and our constituents to lobby the municipality to get sidewalks where they're necessary. I do that in my constituency, and I would expect the honourable member opposite would do that in his, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timberley Prospect on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll remember the next time I see a photo op when we are safely promoting kids walking to school, particularly in certain areas like Kingswood. However, I'd like to turn to the Minister of Education on this topic. It's an important topic. It's a topic of serious concern. I would like the Minister of Education to undertake a review of dangerous situations where kids have to walk to school around this province. I think it would be a logical move to be able to go ahead and contact school boards and say, what areas are you responsible for where children walk along busy roads and there are no sidewalks? I'd like to ask the Minister if she would consider undertaking that particular review, because obviously the Minister of Health Promotion doesn't consider it a top priority.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite. I would be most anxious to discuss anything that would be a guarantee of safety for our students regardless.
Order, please. The time allotted for question period has expired. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect on an introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the attention of the House to a young man who is job shadowing me today, and I know that my friend from Glace Bay is proud of the behaviour of the House today. So I would like to introduce from Ridgecliffe Middle School, grade 9 student, Catelyn Blackburn. Catelyn, could you stand, please?
Indeed, welcome to our guests and all visitors in the gallery today. The Honourable, the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I too would like to do an introduction.
Please do.
In the East Gallery, we have a couple of special guests from Inverness County, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Ed McDonald, councillor in the municipality of Inverness, as well as Mary Jesse, a member of the school board, his wife. Welcome to the House of Assembly.
Indeed, welcome to the House today. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call the order of business public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill number 22, the Motor Vehicle Act. The adjourned debate, I believe, was the honourable member for Pictou West.
Bill number 22, the Motor Vehicle Act. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate this opportunity to have a few moments again to speak about Bill 22. It's an act involving slow-moving vehicles and farm equipment and farm tractors, and the importance of that orange triangular sign that's on the back of the farm equipment. It's really, in many ways, Mr. Chairman, as I said the other day, an important or a common sense bill. It deals with the importance of having the slow-moving vehicle sign on the back of farm equipment and farm tractors. And I suppose you can relate to an analogy of it's just as important as having roll bars on tractors or having headlights on farm tractor after dark. It's really a common sense measure. And it's really, Mr. Speaker, an issue about public safety, about the importance of farm tractors obeying the speed limit, and for the public to realize that there is a farm or a slow-moving vehicle moving down the highway. It's also a way to protect our farm families and our employees that work on our farms, and especially young people, you know, that perhaps are on the road for the first time and perhaps aren't quite as experienced as other farm workers, and for the public to realize that there is a slow-moving vehicle on the highway ahead of them. I come from Pictou County, and certainly I know the importance of our farming community and the importance of having safe vehicles on our roads. You know, the farming community is really the backbone or the core, the base of our rural economy, and as goes the farming community, so goes the community store, the hardware store, the restaurant, the feed mill, other small businesses in the community. And as my colleague just mentioned, the community school. You know, if you have a good, strong farming community, you're going to have strong schools, and even our churches depend upon having you know, a good, strong farming community, vital to our rural economy. This bill is important to our farming community. Certainly, in our counties, and where I come from, I see a number of farm vehicles on the highway all the time, and Mr. Speaker, it's certainly important that we have some rules and regulations for our farming communities so that people will respect the vehicles when they see them moving ahead of them. I know in my own home community where I live in Loch Broom, I see a number of farm vehicles on the highway from time to time as farmers are cutting their hay crop or their silage or getting ready to do fall plowing or harrowing, seeding the grain out and so on. And in fact, I grew up, Mr. Speaker, on a family farm, and certainly had the experience of driving a farm tractor on our public highways at a young age. And it was back in those days there was not a triangular sign on the tractor, and certainly today it's good to know that they're there for the safety of our farming family and for the general motoring public. Today I see farm tractors driving up and down the road in Durham and Scottsburn and Plainfield and River John and various communities in our farming communities. I think of the McLean family in Durham that has a number of farm fields and cattle on both sides of the river, and they're constantly going back and forth between one side of Durham to the other. Unfortunately, right at this time, the bridge is out, and it means a much longer trip for them to go up to Central West River or down to Loch Broom in order to get around to move their farm equipment safely. But I see the Gunn family in Scottsburn that some of you may know that also operate the Stoneham Chalets. They're often on the roads with farm equipment. The Floyd and Sherry Cock and their family run Cinnabar Farms in Plainfield, and again traveling back and forth in that community on our public highways. I'll mention just a couple other farm families in the area. The McDonald family in Green Hill that run Century Mac Farm, the Anderson family in that same community, and we even have an alpaca farm now in near the Scottsburn area that approximately 140 head of alpacas on their farm in that community. So, as I said, Mr. Speaker, there's lots of farm tractors and farm equipment moving up and down our highways. This bill really is about displaying those farm equipment on the back of their tractors or their farm equipment, and it states that the motorized vehicle shall display a sign or an emblem or a device warning motorists of the slow movement of a vehicle. And it mentions that for farm tractors it would be 40 kilometers an hour. That's without any attached equipment. The maximum they could travel would be 40 clicks. That doesn't apply to a truck or otherwise motorized vehicle that's hauling a piece of farm equipment. They're not restricted to that 40 kilometers an hour. But however, Mr. Speaker, if they are hauling a plow or a farm wagon or another piece of farm equipment, then they must be able to stop within 10 meters at any time, and their maximum speed they can go is 20 kilometers an hour. So those are common sense things that will protect the public when traveling down the highway, will protect the farm community, will protect young farm employees that are just perhaps driving for the first time. The only question I have, Mr. Speaker, I don't see it mentioned in the bill, is around penalties for those that perhaps don't obey the law. I am supposing that those may be contained within the regulations that are established to go along with the bill. But overall, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a good bill. It will protect the public, it will protect our farming communities, and it will protect our farm employees that are on our public highways. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to hearing what other members may have to say on the bill, and I certainly look forward to seeing it going forward to law amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Public Works to close debate.
Thank you very
on
much,
Bill number
Mr.
22.
Speaker. I want to thank honourable members for their contribution to this debate, and one of the members from Hants East, member of the NDP caucus, had raised an issue which he asked if I would address, and I'd be quite happy to if the House Leader, if the NDP would be a bit patient. But I do want to point out that the use of the signs, or the triangular signs, and the bill references the fact that if you display that sign, then you must be going below a certain speed, because that's what people's expectation is, and that's the reason for that inclusion in the legislation. So I thank honourable members for their contribution, and I look forward to the bill proceeding through its legislative course. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I moved it when I began my speech.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 22. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion carried.
22, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill number 12, the Education Act. The Minister of Education.
Bill number 12 for second reading. The Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak in favor of Bill number 12, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Education Act. As a former educator, I can tell you that you cannot have quality education without good teachers. Teachers are one of, if not the most important person in the academic life of a student. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia has many fine and dedicated teachers. They are among the best in the country. They are well-trained, highly educated, and amply qualified to teach our young people. They do us proud. To help us maintain those high standards, my department has the responsibility of licensing the profession. Through our certification regime, we make every effort to ensure that our teachers are well qualified. However, Mr. Speaker, as in any profession, a teacher can slip up. The transgression can be severe, or it can be relatively minor. As Minister of Education, my powers to take corrective action against a teacher are limited. Once the department's Registrar of Teacher Certification has investigated a complaint against a teacher and filed a report with me, there are three options: temporarily suspend the teacher's certificate, cancel the teacher's certificate, or take no action. The amendments we are proposing today talk to a situation where a teacher exercises bad judgment and where corrective actions are commensurate with the severity and the impact of the teacher's behavior. Current legislation allows for limited corrective action. Under the proposed amendments and the resulting regulations, the Minister of Education would gain the authority to issue a warning, to issue a letter of reprimand, or to issue a suspension with conditions, which could include counseling, retraining, mentoring, or some other remedial action. Mr. Speaker, these measures would be used in those situations that warrant corrective action, but do not warrant the severe canceling of a teacher's certificate, which would indeed remove the holder from his or her profession. School boards will continue their employer-employee relationship with their teachers and staff. They will continue to discipline teachers and staff for contravening board policies. The Department of Education, Mr. Speaker, will come into the picture when a person's suitability to hold a teaching certificate comes into question. Our role is to ensure students in Nova Scotia receive the education they need to succeed, and that they get this education in a safe, healthy learning environment. We take that role very seriously, Mr. Speaker, and the teacher certificate is one of the instruments we use to ensure talented, qualified professionals are entrusted with caring and educating our children from day to day. In the average year, the Department of Education receives 15 complaints, about 15 complaints regarding inappropriate behavior. These complaints can run the gamut from a teacher who takes a school trip without board permission, or to a teacher who uses physical force on a student. the department cancels or suspends the teacher certificates of approximately 5 individuals on the average per year. Very few when you consider that there are 10,000 public school teachers in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, our amendments will also allow a teacher who is facing an investigation the opportunity to voluntarily surrender their certificate or permit. In some cases, teachers under investigation have indicated a desire to surrender their certificate rather than submit themselves to the embarrassment of an investigation or to cause other affected persons to be approached. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the proposed amendments would expand the Education Minister's reporting authority. My department is concerned that there is no expressed authority to report or advise Nova Scotia school boards or the teacher certification boards of non-Canadian jurisdictions of any information relating to suspension or cancellation except on an annual basis. This type of reporting is neither timely nor broad enough to be completely effective. School boards, as well as certification authorities across Canada, should be informed immediately about any corrective measures taken against a teacher who may be applying for a teaching position inside and or outside Nova Scotia. In closing, Mr. Speaker, let me say that these amendments will bring our legislation in line with practices in other jurisdictions. I present the bill for second reading.
Thank you. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to making some comments on this important piece of legislation. I certainly agree with the Minister when we look at the high quality of the people who are charged with the huge responsibility of educating the children in the public schools of this province. And having had the privilege of working with many of these people for some great years that went by far too quickly, let me tell you, I have huge confidence in the huge majority of teachers in what they do each day in their classroom around this province. I know that this will be an interesting bill as it proceeds through the House and goes next door to law amendments. A committee, of course, that is unique to the process in this province, in this country, where people have the opportunity to appear in front of us as legislators, and I'm privileged to serve on that committee, as you know, Mr. Speaker. At that time, I'm sure that we will hear from school boards and we'll hear from the NSTU, because let me tell you, there's a number that's ingrained in your mind from the moment you get that teacher certificate, and that's your professional number. And you know, people always say, what's your SIN number? But I can tell you, I can remember, I have my SIN number there somewhere, Mr. Speaker, or his social insurance number, as perhaps I should aptly describe it. Thank you from the member from Cape Breton, or member from Pictou, for correcting my slippage there. But I want you to know the number that meant the most to me was my professional number. 263814 is my professional number, was my professional number. And let me tell you, that number is a number of real consequence when you get it, whether you're getting it from whatever department in whatever province across this country. And that number is, of course, your ticket to begin, whether it's substituting, as many young people do today, or whether you had the opportunity, as I did, leaving the New Brunswick situation where I was teaching full-time at Dorchester Penitentiary, and fortunate enough to get a job at Sir John A. Macdonald High School. I listened carefully to what the minister was saying about teacher training, and I have the opportunity, before I get into teacher training, I want to put a few comments on the record about teacher training. And I know of the scope of the bill, of course, because many of the young men and women that I've heard from recently are hugely frustrated with the teacher training possibilities in this province. Before I turn to that, however, the most glaring example, of course, of the problem that we have with this particular incident, I think we could quite aptly call Bill number 12 the Jack Sullivan Reciprocal Act. I don't want to get back into the history of this particular gentleman and what stain he left on the Strait Regional Board. But you know, it was miraculous that Mr. Sullivan, after what he put the Strait Board through, after he put the Department of Education, what he put them through, after he put the teaching profession in his province through, Mr. Sullivan lands on his feet with a job in Manitoba. Manitoba particular school board hires Jack Sullivan to be involved in the administration of their school board. I'm sure that if we look carefully at this piece of legislation, that name alone is a reason to support certain portions of this bill. Because there are people across this province who will not, teachers in particular, who will not soon forget the name Jack Sullivan and what he put this province through and what he put us through as a profession, and the stain, and I know that's strong language, the stain that he put upon the profession when it came to some of the things that he was justifiably accused of. However, recently I've been made aware of the fact that if we look carefully at the past, if we look back as far as February 1994, when the Shapiro report issued their study entitled Teacher Education in Nova Scotia, an Honorable Past, an Alternative Future. 1994. Now, Mr. Shapiro was from the University of Toronto, and he chaired the Nova Scotia Council on Higher Education, this 6-member panel. And he came up with a number of recommendations. Most of these recommendations are of real consequence, and over the years, the department has approached these issues and taken care of them one by one. The Department of Education should offer funding to ensure more African Nova Scotians and more Mi'kmaq teachers are in teacher training. The Department of Education should start offering positions to students, education students, that is, Mr. Speaker, in March in order to avoid losing them to other provinces. Also, that the education program be made a 2-year program, that the overall enrollment for teacher training in 1994 be cut in half. Unfortunately, we now have a situation in this province where we're going to be facing a teacher shortage. And the teacher shortage is an issue that I want to put on the record at this time when I look at this particular piece of legislation. No doubt it's an important piece of legislation. No doubt the Minister of Education has brought it forward, but there are many other issues that should also be included when it comes to this particular issue. If we look that Acadia University in 2006-07 received approximately 500 applications for teacher training. 500 applications. There are 130 seats at that particular university when it comes to teacher training. That Mount St. Vincent had 420 applications, and there's 138 or so spaces at that particular university. Get those numbers correct again. 420 young men and women from throughout this region and this province applied to get into the teacher training program at the Mount St. Vincent, and there are only 138 spaces available. St. FX ranked the #1 undergraduate university in this province until the rankings come out by Maclean's and they're replaced by Mount Allison again, but I'll come to that at another time. 419 young men and women applied to get into the teacher training program at X. There are only 95 spaces available. Now, those are some of the statistics that I have when it comes to the English language university. And of course, Collège Sainte-Anne, University Sainte-Anne, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, plays an important role in training teachers, particularly when it comes to the francophones, and of course it comes to making sure that bilingual teachers are teaching these children properly in bilingual classrooms. That in the English language university training programs, there were in total 1,340 applications, according to the numbers that I've received. And there's only room for approximately 360 students. That's 1 in 4. 1 in 4. If we look at the Shapiro report, it is recommended the minister establish a committee to deal with policy changes for teacher training program to include UCCB and the Cape Breton University. And I want this clearly put in the record because it's an issue of huge consequence for myself, for some of the young men and women that I'm fortunate to have in my community. Why are young men and women from Nova Scotia studying to be teachers having to go to the University of Maine at Fort Kent or Presque Isle? And when we look at the fact that we have young men and women who are leaving our province leaving our country, and they are contributing to the economy of Fort Kent. They're contributing to the state of Maine, or their parents are contributing to the economy of that particular region in northern Maine. Where is the leadership when it comes to teacher training in this province? This is an important piece of legislation. It includes some factors which will be interesting to debate at law amendments. But when it comes to teacher certification, there's a much more and hugely important issue, and that, of course, is teacher training. Teacher training to make sure that our teachers have the opportunity not just to attend university in this province to become a teacher, but universities in this country. And it seems to me this is a fact that is constantly lost on this government, or it certainly was lost on the previous Minister of Education. And I know the Minister is paying attention to these comments. I know she's certainly doing a good job as she begins to continue to get her feet wet, if that's an appropriate expression. I compliment her on this piece of legislation, but I challenge the department to take up the task. I would suggest that Cape Breton University would be an ideal place to put a teacher training. And I know that there are teachers, current teachers in this province, who would say the best place to get a teacher training in this province was the Nova Scotia Teacher College in Truro. The best, bar none. So where is it now? Instead, we have only 1/4 of the young people who want to become teachers being accepted to the English language programs, at least. And the University of St. Anne, I'm sure, has a waiting list that probably rivals that when it comes to the importance of having bilingual teachers in immersion programs, and of course, when we look at the Francophone schools across our province. But where is the leadership on that important issue? When I heard the fact that we were going to be getting Bill 12, my first reaction is we were going to get something about teacher training in this province. We were going to go back, based upon the Shapiro report of 1994, to the possibility of having another university offer a top-flight education program. And I can tell you, my good friend from Cape Breton Centre makes the point very clear time after time. His daughter wants to be a teacher. His daughter wants to be a teacher so badly that because she was not accepted, I believe she had applied to the Mount St. Vincent program, she was not accepted. The member from Cape Breton Centre's daughter is attending the degree granting program at the University of Maine in Fort Kent. An example right in this house. I want you to know that I heard from a recent school principal from the Sackville community, Dale Clattenburg. Dale Clattenburg, a well-known school teacher, his daughter wants to be a school teacher. But Mr. Clattenburg's daughter did not get accepted to Mount St. Vincent. Instead, Mr. Clattenburg's daughter, a well-known local athlete in the Sackville community, a leader in that community, a proud graduate of Sackville High School. Where is this young Clattenburg lady going to school? She's going to school at the University of Maine in Fort Kent. The example I want to bring to your attention, however, is the example of a student who I've known for many years. She, Mr. Speaker, has always wanted to be a teacher. I could say it was my influence, but unfortunately all I can tell you is that I taught her mother and father. She wants to be a teacher. So when I said to her, and her name is Laura Bootler, she's from Hatchet Lake, I said to her, Laura, if you want to be a teacher, you have an option to get a job right away by going out and becoming a French teacher, because we're always in need of French teachers, or become what we really need in the school board, in the school system around this province, in school boards across this province, a math teacher. Laura Bootler has a math major. She's an honors student who's done exceptionally well. She's well-grounded. She's an outstanding athlete. She has qualities that would make her an excellent teacher when the time comes. But where are Mike and Julia Bootler's daughter going to university? She's going to the University of Maine at Fort Kent. And here we have it again. Three quick examples. Three examples from my friend from Sackville High School days that was brought to my attention by the MLA from Sackville-Cobequid, brought to my attention by the good member from Cape Breton Centre. Thank God that his daughter has the brains and good looks of his mother. Thank God she wants to be a teacher, because I want you to know, when I have the opportunity to talk to that young lady again, my first question will be, How is everything at the University of Fort Kent? But more importantly, who's paying the bills? Who's paying the bills as we contribute to the University of Maine and we contribute to the state of Maine as they continue to train our teachers? That, Mr. Speaker, sticks deep in my craw. And I know that Bill 12 deals with other issues that are important to deal with, whether it's the Jack Sullivan example or whether it's other things. But I can tell you, I encourage the Department of Education to pick the ball up on this and run with it. To pick the ball up, to go to the Cape Breton University campus and look very carefully at the fact that there should be an extended education program at that university so that our children, our students, will be going to university in this province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The order, please. The honourable member from Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly feel privileged today to rise and speak on this bill. And of course, it's one that that obviously, as a teacher, it's easy to digress to probably a few other areas that would be involved in education. First of all, I think we all recognize in this House and in this province the impact that teachers have on the lives of young people. And all of us here, of course, have teachers that we know influenced our lives in many, many positive ways. Many, in fact, teacher coaches who were our mentors and who took a special interest in how our education was unfolding. So we are fortunate in this province to have a very strong teaching force, teaching complement. And that, of course, has really come about by, I think, the sense of vocation that many teachers have towards the profession. Also, to be fortunate to have the schools of education and the former Teachers College, which, of course, help produce the kind of teachers that we all know and recognize in this province. So I wanted to make that statement first of all. The high regard that I certainly have for teachers and for colleagues over the years. There's no question, however, that in that group of teachers, no matter how good screening may be done in terms of selecting teachers and also developments throughout a career, every now and then there will be a teacher that in fact does have to go through some type of disciplinary action from a board, possibly being removed. And I think that's what this piece of legislation is all about. But I think the spirit of the legislation here, I certainly do like where it allows for the formal warning, a letter to the teacher outlining actions to be taken, to suspension, I think all the way through. So I think there's a process here that in fact will address different levels that of perhaps inappropriate conduct, but also allows for that, I guess, rehabilitation, counseling support that may be needed. I was certainly pleased to hear the minister say that here in Nova Scotia, with a teaching force of about 10,000, there are only about 15 complaints a year. And that certainly, I think, again, is another measure of the quality of the teaching force that we do have, and with only about 5 certificates, teacher's license that actually get canceled on an annual basis. I think, however, bringing legislation to the process in which teachers are indeed regulated when there is some type of misdeed in the classroom or on a school trip that in fact needs to be corrected and needs to be certainly challenged to the full extent that the minister has the power to do so through Bill 12. I know that also there are, in fact, extreme times and where we have teachers who will voluntarily relinquish their license, and unfortunately, or fortunately, there are only a few occasions when that does happen. The other aspect to the bill here that certainly I'm very, very strong on, and that is seeing a reporting system that will be Canada-wide. One of the things that we often talk about, going back a number of years in education, was the portability, that teachers could enjoy in terms of their licenses and teacher certification in other provinces, years of experience, and so on. But I'm also pleased to see that if a teacher is not suited to be in front of a classroom, to be in guidance, to be in administration, whatever the case is in this province, and certainly there is a record of what has taken place, then that should be made available to other parts of the country so that there isn't a repeat. There are only perhaps a few professions that carry the degree of trust that an educator does have. When parents drop their child off at school, we know that the trust now of a parent is placed on that teacher. And I think when that code of conduct, and it's one of those things that I know as a young teacher, I remember having a mentor teacher who actually took out the code of conduct for me to read. And it was one of the little practice that as a mentor teacher, that as a student teacher, I had to check off on my list that he required of those who came in his classroom. And it was a wonderful, I think, example to me, and at just that moment in time where I realized the great responsibilities that I was carrying as a teacher. So I think Bill 12 is dealing with a very, very small population of professionals, but I think it deals with it in a more assertive and a much clearer way. And so I do support the legislation. Our caucus discussed the legislation and certainly are all in agreement with this bill. The other opportunity that this bill affords me, of course, is to speak to the issue of teacher training in the province, because certainly teacher training, I think, and strong teacher training is reflected in the people that eventually will go in the classrooms of our province. I think, however, now that we are at a point in time in this province where I would certainly be pleased to certainly not just suggest to the minister, but perhaps ask and challenge the minister to do a review of teacher education, and that for a number of reasons. The major glut of teachers that we have had, with teachers getting educated in our programs at St. FX and at Mount St. Vincent and at Acadia, as well as St. Anne's, and a number that leave the province. We're starting to see a shift here very dramatically, in fact, when we have 700 or 800 teachers retiring in a given year. So I think now, in fact, we may even find this year that there may not be enough substitutes come those months of January, February, flu season. So I think it's time to take a look at how we deliver the program and the numbers that we need in this province. I think, as my colleague had pointed out, the Shapiro report of '94 talked about an additional institution, and I'm certainly in favor of certainly promoting that concept. When we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300 applications, but only about 360 that can be taken in each year, you know, I think the time has come for us to look at expanding the education programs. I think it falls nicely in line with the fact that we have a number of institutions whose enrollment has gone down. This is still a very, very high demand kind of a program. And so I'd like to see certainly some of those numbers, you know, addressed and greater opportunity. The reality is right now that amongst UNB, St. Thomas, Memorial, University of Maine at Presque Isle and Kent, that there is somewhere in the neighborhood of over 200 Nova Scotians that are receiving their education degrees. So I think it speaks to the fact that we are not able to look after young Nova Scotians. In fact, I think one of the ministers in this House, in fact, perhaps has a daughter at one of those institutions, and perhaps she would like to have stayed here in the province. And it certainly is no reflection, again, on the quality of the candidate that applies for education, but it's simply a reality. We have too few places, and I believe the time is coming to take a look. And perhaps geography could influence. We could have another area of the province served by an education program. Also, I'm not a real strong proponent of a two-year program. I've discussed this with a number of the university presidents, and I don't get a full take on this particular aspect, but certainly there are very fine teachers that are produced in programs that are of a year or 16-month duration. And I personally like the concept of 1 year of theory in our schools of education with a second year under the tutelage or the mentoring of a master teacher, where you have on-the-job training for a full year. We have some outstanding educators who are between 25 and 35 years who are going to be leaving the profession, who have so much to offer a young teacher. And I'd like to see that opportunity again for our students to engage in a full year, the cycle of the school year. And one of the things that this actually does is help a young student teacher walk through the process from September to June, what's involved in a school year, and the kind of engagement with young people and all that may go on in a classroom from September to June. And I think it would give them a greater sense of, is this the profession they really do want to be in? The other last point, I guess, that I'd like to make in terms of the need to increase the numbers in our schools of education is the fact that there are a number of people who get an education degree and are able to use it very, very well and very fully outside of teaching. There are companies now who hire people who have teacher training because there are big companies that do year-round training of people, and the strategies that a teacher can gain are great, of course, in the workplace, and I think adult education. There's a whole number of areas where, in fact, teacher training can benefit the workplace beyond the school, although that is the primary objective of these programs. So I certainly look forward to seeing this bill moved on. I certainly will be eager to hear the comments from the Nova Scotia Teachers Union and institutions perhaps that of training that may be affected or feel in some way related to this piece of legislation. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will close debate on Bill number 12.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Speaker. I just want to congratulate the minister for bringing this bill in. It's a good bill and it's a needed bill. I, as some people know, occupied the office of Minister of Education for a few years, and some of the difficulties that we encountered with disciplinary measures or with teachers that had gone astray, that will be remedied. We give the minister more authority and indeed perhaps more reasonable courses of action than are available under the current the current legislation. I remember frustration on a couple of occasions where teachers had justifiably been chastised, but you really had the choice: is that you remove them totally, or you left them. There was no in between. You either took the license or you left it. And so the ability of what one might call an appropriate measure of discipline to be handed out was very, very disciplined. And this new piece of legislation will take care of that. The other thing which the minister mentioned in her opening comments and was commented on from the other side of the House was the issue of reporting suspensions or cancellations of certificate. Not only did I work in the office of the Minister of Education, I had been in the Department of Education dealing as a bureaucrat with teachers and teacher certificates, and I can tell you that the issue of reporting suspensions is a very important thing, and it should be done as soon as practically possible. The annual reporting is just not sufficient. I can remember cases of getting calls from people and saying, well, such and such was suspended in this jurisdiction, and they're now teaching in Nova Scotia or applied to teach in Nova Scotia. And if you didn't get that word, sort of because somebody knew you or knew somebody in the Department of Education, there was no formal mechanism to get it. So I think what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, and why it's so good is it protects the interests of Nova Scotian students. It will give better protection to Nova Scotia students than exist under the current legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recognize the Honourable the Minister of Education to close debate on Bill number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would first like to acknowledge and thank the speakers, both from the opposite side and from our government, for their comments and for acknowledging the benefits of this bill and how it will, in the long run, make things better for students in our school, and that's what motivates all of us. So I appreciate your comments. Before I move on with the second reading, I would like to add that it was music to my ears to hear the comments with respect to teacher training opportunities. And I have been visiting all of the boards across the province, and I have met with the presidents of the Nova Scotia locals of the Teachers Union. And in all of those meetings, one of the priorities that they've asked me about was that of teacher certification and teacher training. So that is something that we want to move forward on, and I appreciate the comments and obviously the support that will be there for that initiative. I would like to move Bill number 12 for second reading and on to law amendments.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 12. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried.
Act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Government House Leader, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Public Bill number 5, Degree Granting Act, for second reading?
Public bills for second reading, Bill number 5. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak in favor of Bill number 5, an act to amend Chapter 123 of the revised statutes, the Degree Granting Act. The world of higher education has changed significantly over the last 2 decades. Our universities and community colleges provide Nova Scotians, as well as students from across Canada and around the world, with a high-quality post-secondary education. But, Mr. Speaker, they are not the only choices open to students. Private universities and career colleges are a growing presence on Canada's post-secondary landscape. Career colleges have been a fixture in this province for many years and add a valuable option for many students. To date, there are no private universities in Nova Scotia. However, over the last few years and within the last few months, our department has received a number of inquiries from Canadian, American, and international organizations interested in establishing degree-granting schools in Nova Scotia. Presently, Mr. Speaker, we have no ability within our existing legislation to ensure the educational programs provided by a private degree-granting institution will be of suitable high quality. Mr. Speaker, the proposed amendments to the Degree Granting Act will give the province regulatory authority over new private institutions that want to issue degrees in Nova Scotia. Our proposed amendments, Mr. Speaker, are necessary to protect Nova Scotia's enviable place with its 11 public universities and the 13 campuses of the Nova Scotia Community College as Canada's education province. The Degree Granting Act has not been revised since its inception in 1989, and many changes have occurred in post-secondary education since then, including the introduction of private universities in other provinces. Quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, the Act is out of date. As it currently stands, the legislation could be interpreted to mean that private post-secondary education institutions could offer degrees in the province of Nova Scotia simply by having that authority granted by the act of another provincial legislature or by being a member of the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada. There is no provision for regulation, financial audit, or quality assurance by the province of Nova Scotia. Everyone in this House would agree that we want to make sure all of our educational institutions, whether they be public universities, community colleges, career colleges, or private universities, are of the highest quality, and that we have the legislative mechanism to demand quality performance. The proposed amendments, Mr. Speaker, will give the government authority to establish a process to review applications from organizations that request authorization from the government to grant degrees in Nova Scotia. Regulations developed pursuant to this Act will ensure that any institution that wishes to grant degrees in Nova Scotia would need to prove it has sufficient financial security and faculty with the appropriate credentials. Without these amendments, we would continue to lack the authority to evaluate organizations wanting to establish a private university. This could, Mr. Speaker, put students at risk both financially and academically. It could also jeopardize how our universities are perceived. We want the courses of study offered and the credentials granted within Nova Scotia to continue to be of consistently high quality as students from across Canada have come to expect. Mr. Speaker, these amendments will require a prospective private university to apply to the Department of Education for authorization to grant degrees. They will have to prove that they are financially secure. They will have to assure Nova Scotians that they will educate students to an appropriate academic standard and that their programs do not duplicate existing programs in a public institution. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, a modernized Degree Granting Act will allow the Department of Education to have the authority to review a private university's financial and administrative records on an ongoing basis. This would give us the confidence that it was operating within the Act, and most importantly, the province would also be empowered to set reasonable conditions on the university's authority to grant degrees. We are, of course, Mr. Speaker, not alone in this. Other provinces have addressed regulations of private degree-granting institutions over the past several years. Our proposed amendments to the Act and creation of regulations will accomplish the task in the most straightforward manner available. Given that the status quo could result in an influx of institutions from outside the province offering redundant or questionable programs, Amendments of the Act is, in our view, Mr. Speaker, a very important issue. As I said, no private universities exist in this province, but we anticipate applications will be made. It is essential that we have criteria in place before an official request comes forward. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I encourage the members of this House to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax and Dill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend the Minister for bringing this bill forward and for bringing it to this place for discussion, because it is a very important measure and it does require a full and public airing. It has much to commend it. It adds a definition of public institutions that I think we need to discuss. It's not just in education, but in other areas as well. Healthcare, for example, as to what exactly is a public institution, and when does a public institution become public, and when is it, in fact, effectively privatized. It seeks to ensure that only public institutions authorized by an act of the legislature may be allowed to grant degrees. At least, certainly that's what the explanatory notes say. Certainly the Minister's remarks suggest that it has other objectives, and I'm going to speak to those objectives in a few minutes. It seeks to establish processes and set standards for institutions applying for degree granting status, and it allows for the delegation of duties in the regulation to third parties. In all of these things, I agree with the Minister. The Act does need updating, and it is time for a full and frank discussion about post-secondary education and the status of post-secondary education institutions and the funding and the regulation of these institutions. And so for all of these things, I commend the Minister for bringing this forward. While this bill has its strengths and on the surface has noble objectives, it also has some flaws. And in my opinion, in our opinion, these flaws in this present state are fatal. It allows for the recognition of private, nonprofit universities, and we need to have a debate about that in and of itself, whether or not this very important public function should be privatized and should be made available, that access to these institutions should be made available to those based on how much they have in their bank accounts and less than what they have in their heads, and the extent to which public funds and public regulations will support those institutions. Now, again, I commend the Minister for bringing this forward, because she does provide a basis for discussing this in a straightforward manner. But it does create for private degree-granting institutions here in Nova Scotia, and we should make it clear that that is the most important part of this legislation. I should say that her comments on career colleges are interesting too, because that too is an area that needs regulation, and we need to have a discussion of that, because students are exploited there, there are no standards set, and we've had numerous complaints on this side of the House from people who've been registered in these career colleges, and essentially they're exploited by these fly-by-night operations. So while the stated objectives of this bill are reasonably noble, and it seeks to ensure that institutions that directly or indirectly grant degrees will be recognized, the bill also allows for recognition of degree-granting universities from other jurisdictions, from other provinces. In other words, it gives this recognition almost automatically to other provinces. So, for example, the government of Alberta recently recognized the DeVry Institute of Technology as a degree-granting institution, and incidentally, while the building is called the DeVry Institute of Technology, on the website they're DeVry University. And essentially what this legislation says is that if this college is recognized by another provincial government, by another provincial legislature, then they have the right to apply for degree-granting status here automatically. I have a problem with that, not just because these are private universities, but because I believe the right to recognize degree-granting institutions should reside exclusively with the province of Nova Scotia and this legislature. The bill, BC and Alberta and Ontario grant degrees, allow a number of private institutions and career colleges to grant degrees. In fact, there's a lot of discussion there about mirroring and paralleling degrees and diplomas and certificates. Essentially, this legislation allows that to happen. We know, and from the debate that preceded this bill, we have a difficult time recognizing credentials from teachers. Cape Breton students who study at Memorial University, for example, don't have their credentials recognized. Teachers with years of experience in Ontario who move here don't get their credentials recognized. And here we are, we seem to be granting almost an omnibus type of authorization to other provinces and other universities to grant degrees here. And I think if it applies at the local level, at the individual level, it should also apply at the institutional level, that we should establish our standards in Nova Scotia and in this legislature. The bill also says that no institution shall directly or indirectly grant degrees unless that institution is authorized by the Governor and Council. Mr. Speaker, this is a tremendous departure from previous practice. Degree granting status has always been established and authorized by an act of the legislature. To give the Governor and Council the authority to establish the degree granting status is dangerous because it allows the minister, however well-meaning she or he may be, to set the standard and for rules. I'm going to say a little bit more about that later. This is a significant departure. There's a long tradition, a long history of universities being given the degree granting status has rested with the legislature, in part to remove it from what may be a discretionary and arbitrary authority exercised by the Minister of Education. The bill also permits the minister to make regulations regarding a whole range of things: the application process, the authorization of a particular body or a particular process, the renewal and revocation process. We agree that the universities need these clear processes, that we need an application process that's transparent. We need an application process that is clear. We need an application process with standards. We have to review them. We need to have this process for revocation. But it's not clear why this authority should be given to the minister where these things are dealt with by regulation, when they're so important, including financial standards. In fact, the minister put more of a premium on financial standards than academic standards that will have to be met by these institutions. The minister proposes to set standards for programs as well, for instructors, for facilities, for academic standards. That's unprecedented. We've never had ministers who've gone to that stage to micromanage the internal affairs of universities or the university system itself. So apart from the question of whether this is going to be done by regulation or not, the setting of that standards by the minister is unprecedented. Whether the institutions are private or public is really irrelevant. Essentially, what this government proposes to do is allow and put a great deal of discretionary authority in the hands of the minister and probably bureaucrats down the road. Mr. Speaker, this bill crosses the line in terms of academic freedom as well, apart from the regulatory problem. The principle of academic freedom that allows academics and universities to speak, without fear, favor, or affection for the government of the day was established precisely to avoid this kind of situation where the minister can go back to a university and say, we don't recognize your standards. We don't recognize the caliber of your instructors. We believe you're financially unstable. And use that to prevent a university or a faculty member from criticizing the government itself. We know that it's happened in British Columbia recently, Mr. Speaker. So for that reason, we believe that the principle of academic freedom is important enough that the establishment of these standards should be done elsewhere. It's not the business of government to micromanage universities. It does not help the university system. It does not help society. It does not help anyone other than it gives the minister the discretionary authority that we think is harmful in the long run. And we've seen from what happens with this government in other areas that it has the capacity to infuse that agency that will probably be created with partisanship and patronage. The legislation says that the minister has the discretion to establish an arm's length agency to which can be delegated these authorities. We don't see any of that here. The regulation itself, as it's worded, allows the Department of Education to exercise those functions. We believe that every other province, we know that every other province that has established a body and a process like this has created an arm's length agency. And British Columbia, Ontario, and Alberta, even though we're not particularly impressed with the terms of reference or the standards or the way in which those members are appointed, have taken it on themselves, have chosen to establish an arm's length, relatively arm's length process. And we believe that we need to see that body before we give authorization to the minister to establish these private for-profit universities in Nova Scotia. The process also doesn't allow for an appeals process. At least the only appeals process outlined here is the discretion of the minister. We don't believe that the minister should play this role, where the minister essentially sets the standards, reviews the standards, judges whether the standards have been met, and then acts as the appeal board to determine that there has to be an appeal process that is fair and open. In summary, while this bill has apparently noble objections to establish a regulatory process for degree-granting institutions, it's fatally flawed. It's fatally flawed because it establishes the grounds for private, for-profit universities here in Nova Scotia. It's fatally flawed because it permits other provinces to determine whether or not we recognize the degree-granting status of post-secondary educational institutions. We believe it's fatally flawed because it authorizes the minister to grant degree-granting status, a power historically exercised by the legislature. We believe it's fatally flawed because it permits the minister to micromanage the internal affairs of universities and violates the principle of academic freedom. It does not establish an arm's-length body to set and to review and enforce standards. In the absence of an appeal process, it allows the minister to serve as lawmaker, judge, jury, and appeals body. For these reasons, we object to this bill in its present form. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and speak for a few minutes to Bill number 5, the Degree Granting Act. I spoke to the minister prior to coming into the House around some issues that I had with the bill. I first want to agree with her on the quality of education that is offered to Nova Scotia students here at our 11 institutions. I don't think anyone in the House would want to put in jeopardy. Is that better? I don't think anyone would want to put in jeopardy the quality of education that students are receiving at the post-secondary institutions here in our province. This issue has been brought to my attention because of a university in Vermont, Goddard University, which is looking at coming to Annapolis Royal in my constituency. The community of Annapolis Royal has spoken to the department prior to getting into a conversation and an agreement with Goddard and asked were there any issues around this private college starting up at Annapolis Royal. And at that point, there weren't any issues. The deliberations have gone on for some time. They are coming to the point where those deliberations will be final, but all of a sudden this act has come forward, which I believe and they believe will put a stop to that. And I really, Mr. Speaker, don't understand the importance of this bill or the significance of this bill and what we're attempting to do. One of the minister had spoken about trying to protect the public institutions in Nova Scotia. I think the public institutions will be protected in Nova Scotia because of the quality of education they offer. My concern about the institutions in Nova Scotia is the cost of attending them. And I think that'll put them in jeopardy more than anything else, not private colleges coming into this province. It's not like we're going to have a mass entrance of private colleges wanting to come in and open up into our province. But I do believe if we continue to have the escalating rise in tuition and the cost of post-secondary education for our students, that will put those 11 institutions in trouble, not the private schools that are coming here. One of the issues that the minister had spoke about was the issue of trying to protect the investment of those students, the investment of that family into their education. Mr. Speaker, I believe that can be done without the changes in this bill. I believe that can be done by requiring in regulation that there be a bond posted by that college or by any private school who wants to operate in the province of Nova Scotia to protect that investment of our families and of our students. The other issue is around the level and quality of that education. They also can be done, Mr. Speaker, in regulations. It is, I believe it is incumbent on the department to set guidelines for the level of that education. But I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if that needs to be exclusive to public institutions. I think that can be provided in private institutions. We have seen in this province the out-migration of youth, the out-migration of our children, not only from rural Nova Scotia to Halifax, but right out of this province to attend post-secondary education. Mr. Speaker, this is an opportunity for the students, by and large, I would dare say in Western Nova Scotia, to have an opportunity to attend, if they chose to, a college in their community. It has been a relationship that has been developed between a town, quite frankly, that's been hit hard by the tourism decline, by a number of other issues that have been, the economic impact has been, the economic results of that area has been hard on the town of Annapolis Royal. And this is an opportunity for them to diversify their economy, to reach out, to try to provide another economic spin-off. This university or this college would provide, in an economic spin-off, Mr. Speaker, in the vicinity of about $400,000 to the local area. Mr. Speaker, that may not sound like a lot of money to some members who represent larger constituents, but of mine, that's a huge investment for the people of my area as we move forward. I think it is important that we protect the quality of that education, but again, Mr. Speaker, I don't see that this has to change in this way. I believe the minister can bring regulations forward that all universities could meet, and particularly the private schools coming in could meet as we move forward. What's been interesting is Goddard University has been receiving 20% of their students from Canada, and because of visa issues, Mr. Speaker, that 20% dropped to 1%. What they are trying to do is come as a private school to come to us, come to our students and allow us an opportunity to be educated at home in the local community. It's an opportunity for what they would do is run during a semester program 8 on-site campus days of intensive studying, and the rest of it would be done online, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's interesting whether that student is receiving that education from Goddard and Annapolis Royal or going to Goddard. Are we questioning the quality of that education? I'm assuming that degree would be accepted here in Nova Scotia by many of the employers here. So I would ask the minister to be engaged with the town. I would ask the minister to look at the work that has already been done prior to this act being changed. Quite frankly, the town did due diligence. The town went and spoke to the Department of Education, who at the time saw no problem with this arrangement, saw no problem with the town investing their time, their energy into trying to diversify their economy. And all of a sudden, in the 11th hour, Mr. Speaker, this bill change now will put all of that work into jeopardy. I would ask the minister to, as we move forward, to engage the mayor, engage the CAO of the town of Annapolis Royal, to find a way to look at how we can come to a reasonable solution to this problem. You know, I will go back, and I hope the minister will respond to this at some later date around the issue of quality of education and how preventing private colleges into the province of Nova Scotia will protect the quality of education. It is it's nonsensical, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker. I don't see a way that makes sense. What will affect the quality, what will affect the universities in this province is the continual rise in tuition. It's why our students are leaving here. It was spoken earlier in Bill 12 around the students in Fort Kent, in Newfoundland, all over. Those students are leaving here not just because of access, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker. A lot of those students in Newfoundland are leaving because of the high cost of tuition. Allowing a private college into the town of Annapolis Royal will provide many Nova Scotians with the opportunity, if they so choose, to be educated here in the province of Nova Scotia, to be able to move forward at a reasonable cost, Mr. Speaker. And it is one that I think we need to take a serious look at as we move forward. Again, I will say in my closing, I want to say that I think the minister, it is incumbent on the minister to have a standard of quality that all private institutions should adhere to when they come in. But I want her to understand that this is about no public money. This is about an opportunity for the town and a private college to cooperate, to provide an option, quite frankly, for parents and students of Nova Scotia and of Atlantic Canada, if so be. But there is no public money. I want her to be very cautious as she moves forward. Not only are you have the responsibility to protect the quality of the education, but you should not do it at the detriment of access for Nova Scotia students. This is, and this is what I believe this is more than anything. If my children choose to attend this school, that would be up to them and up to us as a family. If my children choose to attend St. Mary's or wherever, that would be up to them and us as a family. If my children choose to go to Alberta, that would be up to them and myself. Your role and the role of the department is to provide, to ensure that any institution in this province is providing a quality education. That's it. If there's no public money involved, that's where it stops. I should have the right, as my children should have the right, to attend that university if they so choose, or college. And I want you to be very cautious about this, because I think it'll have a huge impact on the economy of our small community as we move forward. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to adjourn debate on Bill number 5. Adjourn debate on Bill number 5.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for adjourning debate on Bill number 5. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those against? Motion carried. The Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to call Bill number 62, the Tobacco Access Act. Mr. Barnett.
Thank you. Public bills for second reading. Bill number 62. The Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to move Bill number 62, an act to amend Chapter 14 of the Acts of 1993, the Tobacco Access Act, and speak for a few moments to the bill. Today is a special day to be the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection and to discuss Bill number 62. This bill, Mr. Speaker, will fulfill another Blue Book commitment we made to the people of Nova Scotia. It is my goal to make Nova Scotia the healthiest province in this country. Through this bill, we will be moving one step closer to that goal. Mr. Speaker, since the implementation of the tobacco control strategy, our overall smoking rates have fallen from 30% down to 21% of Nova Scotians smoking. Our smoking rates among young Nova Scotians have fallen even more impressively, Mr. Speaker, from 27% to 13%. In terms of sales to minors and compliance checks, we have conducted an astonishing 1,133 checks between June and September of this year. Our compliance rates as a result of these visits were almost 80%. This is tremendous progress, and it is a result of our passionate and dedicated partners and our staff across the province. Mr. Speaker, we also know that our work is far from finished. With every step forward we take, the tobacco industry spends more money to find new ways to target and market tobacco products. Mr. Speaker, Our youth are being targeted in new and subtle ways by aggressive marketers who have deep pockets. Large, visual appealing cigarette and tobacco product displays are located in most gas stations and local stores. These power walls, as they are called, place the health and safety of Nova Scotians as well as our children at risk. I cannot, in good conscience, allow cigarette prices to be marketed alongside the price of milk. As an elected official in this province and as a minister responsible for promoting and protecting the health of our collective constituents, I believe it is my responsibility to act as a catalyst for shaping and creating a healthy and productive future. Reducing tobacco use is a key piece of that healthier future. Mr. Speaker, a true tobacco-free culture is more than just a reduction of use. It's an absence of enticement to start. Bill 62 will literally pull the plug on power walls and is another step towards protecting the health and safety of Nova Scotians from the dangerous use of tobacco products. Mr. Speaker, this bill requires that as of March 31st, 2007, tobacco companies will no longer be permitted to promote tobacco prices or to display tobacco products in Nova Scotia stores. Tobacco products will have to be completely concealed from public view. Only the vendor will be able to see the products. A curtain simply covering the display will not be permitted, as this still provides visual access to tobacco products. Mr. Speaker, research shows us that the out-of-sight, out-of-mind strategy will produce positive results on overall consumption rates. Along with our comprehensive tobacco control strategy, the evidence shows that over time, one step at a time, it will have a positive impact on reducing tobacco use. We know that tobacco companies, tobacco advertising at point of sale influences the chances that our youth will experiment with tobacco and initiate established patterns of continued tobacco use. We also know that youth will overestimate the prevalence of smoking in society with the presence of tobacco promotion and advertising. They will tend to believe that everyone smokes. Advertising at point of sale plays a role in making tobacco seem normal, safe, and undermines health information. We also need to remember that the tobacco industry is doing this to attract new customers. According to the federal government, through required document disclosure by tobacco industry, payments to tobacco retailers have been growing steadily over the last several years, from $74 million in the year 2001 to over $100 million in 2005. We know that tobacco promotion and advertising serves as cues for current smokers to continue and creates an opportunity to increase impulse buying by daily smokers and occasional smokers. Mr. Speaker, tobacco industry spends an estimated $100 million annually on these power walls. They would only make such an investment if it was working. By allowing tobacco products to be in plain sight, we have normalized the use and acceptance of tobacco use. Effective March 2007, this will no longer be the case. Mr. Speaker, the mandate of my department is to improve the health and safety of all Nova Scotians. In striving to reach that goal, we must support an overall shift in culture. We must provide provide support necessary to move Nova Scotians away from unhealthy habits and towards healthy choices. Without our encouragement, our dedication, and yes, legislation, that shift would not occur. Mr. Speaker, it is a contradiction in our mandate to support physical activity and encourage Nova Scotians to participate in healthy living, while at the same time allow tobacco products to be available at those same facilities. With Bill 62, we will expand the list of establishments that are prohibited from selling tobacco. Recreation facilities such as gymnasiums, pools and rinks, community colleges, and universities, to name but a few, will no longer be permitted to market or sell tobacco products. Mr. Speaker, I know this is an aggressive decision with aggressive timelines, but there is no reasonable way to avoid the simple, plain facts. Tobacco use kills over 1,600 Nova Scotians a year. Another 200 die from exposure to secondhand smoke. The loss is preventable. We also know that we need to be flexible if necessary to address any new marketing schemes regarding where tobacco is to be stored. This is why our government reserves the authority in this bill to regulate specifically where tobacco products are to be placed. The development of this legislation was carefully considered, based on the facts and the mandate of my department. And at the end of the day, it was clear to me that this was a responsible and appropriate next step in the promotion and the protection of our health and safety. Mr. Speaker, by removing power walls from our culture, we are aggressively sending a message to the tobacco industry: our children are off limits. As Minister of Health Promotion and Protection, I am committed to meet every new challenge the tobacco industry puts in front of us. Some may say that Bill 62 targets small business owners in this province. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. Small business owners have supported our legislation and do so day in and day out, and for that we thank them. The bill is targeted toward tobacco companies in a very simple and direct and unequivocal fashion. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly who we're after. Tobacco use costs the province of Nova Scotia $168 million in direct health care costs and $300 million in indirect costs such as loss in productivity. Our province cannot afford to foot this exorbitant bill. Nova Scotians deserve better, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank both parties across the floor for their support of this bill. Support has been overwhelming, and we are proud to continue to be viewed as leading the way in protecting the health and safety of Nova Scotians. One of the early concerns we have heard so far is about the security of those who work in the convenience stores. Clerks have indicated their concerns about having to bend down to open drawers containing tobacco products. They say that in doing so, they lose sight of their customers and could potentially put their safety at risk. Mr. Speaker, we have taken their concerns seriously, and we have taken action to research their claims. In discussion with other jurisdictions who have similar legislation, they have had no reported increase in violent crimes toward convenience store clerks. Mr. Speaker, we in no way wish to put hard-working Nova Scotians in harm's way. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that even today's clerks must turn their backs on customers to remove tobacco products from their shelves where tobacco products are currently displayed. Some products are located on the bottom shelf and some on walls that even span the entire back wall of the store. Mr. Speaker, most of these concerns could possibly be dealt with through the use of mirrors or in-store video surveillance with the monitor in a position that the clerk can see at all times. I encourage all store owners and managers to properly train their employees in how to do their job in a safe manner. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be available for discussion with those directly affected by these changes, and we will collaborate with them to attain compliance with the law. However, let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, we are committed to this bill and in reducing overall tobacco consumption in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, to demonstrate our commitment to this bill, we have deployed penalties that will be enforced if vendors are found to be in violation. We are hopeful, however, that we will not have to issue any fines, and we are confident that all vendors are interested in protecting the health and safety of their customers and all Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, this bill, like all of our work at the Department of Health Promotion and Protection, has been developed to protect the health and safety of all Nova Scotians. That certainly includes those citizens who reside on First Nations. We are equally committed to working with our First Nations partners to see they are protected from the deadly use of tobacco products. Mr. Speaker, we have every confidence that First Nations leaders share our vision for a healthy, productive, and safe population, and we are ready and eager to work together to accomplish this goal. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity, and in closing, I want to make clear my commitment to make Nova Scotia the healthiest province in our country. And with the passage of this bill, Bill number 62, I am confident that we will move one step closer to making this goal a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to stand here and appreciate the opportunity to speak to this most important bill to amend the Tobacco Access Act, which defines the legislation for point-of-sales and, in particular, the removal of power walls. Here we are in 2006, and probably 40, 50 years ago, it was a very in thing to be a smoker. And, you know, today we have seen this government take a very important step in making that not a very attractive thing indeed, and especially for our youth. As an ex-smoker and an ex-smoker who has from time to time fallen from grace, nothing disturbs me more than walking through my communities and seeing young people lighting up a cigarette, whether it be outside of the schools, off of the playgrounds, or in their backyards. It is clearly disturbing to see a young person pick up a cigarette today. And this move to amend this act is such an important message that we are sending to the tobacco companies who for years have been preying on consumers, encouraging them to pick up cigarettes, which is a deadly addiction, and I can't speak more passionately about the fact that this makes me very pleased indeed to see that the minister has brought this forward. Youth have been telling me in my own community how difficult it is for them to give up smoking. I know doctors in my community who have been handing out the patch to youth as young as 14 and 15 years old to get them, to encourage them to quit smoking. That is a crime. That is a crime that the tobacco companies have placed in our laps in this day and age. And again, kudos to the minister for bringing this forward. I look forward to working with our community health boards and our community health professionals to continue to work hard to encourage young people to give up the habit of smoking, the addiction of smoking. It is these community members and these health members in our communities that are working with our youth and adults who are falling ill to cancer and other tobacco-related illnesses. These healthcare professionals are the ones that have to talk with loved ones when a terminal diagnosis has been made. Youth have been telling me that they can walk into a store and they are very attracted to those powerful displays and all of the other paraphernalia and signage that tobacco companies put out there to encourage young people to smoke. They also inform me that it's easy for a young person to buy cigarettes in a corner store. Some youth are putting their licenses out as a form of ID, and some of these youth are 16 years of age or 17 years of age, and they're telling me how easy it is to hand over a license as that picture ID, and unfortunately the clerk behind the counter is not recognizing that information on that piece of ID. So even though this one very important step to strip the advertising and the promotional materials that are used by tobacco companies, we also have to look at other problems within with youth having cigarettes made available to them. And of course, we all know that there are some adults who supply cigarettes to our youth, and that's a very, very serious concern. You know, for years we have been taken in by the tobacco companies. They spend, as the minister indicated, well over $100 million a year in advertising dollars to encourage young people to smoke, to encourage ex-smokers to perhaps pick up the addiction again. They have been paying well in excess of $100 million to retailers to put put up those promotional power walls, to carry the signage that they use on their counters in the form of wall clocks, in the form of lighters, in the form of matches. And that's a real serious concern when tobacco companies are constantly giving incentives to our retailers. And so, you know, our retailers are even though they are very supportive of this amendment, I think there are a lot of retailers out there who are concerned as to what those incentives, without those incentives coming into their retail outlets, what that looks like for them at the end of the day. I think it's important for the government to really help retailers as they move through this transition, as they move towards taking those power walls down and setting up their counters or their cupboards underneath their counters to store tobacco products. You know, the government needs to be there to answer their questions, their concerns, to help them through this very huge transition for them. Our retailers, too, need to be very clear on what the enforcement regulations look like. They need to be clear on what the penalties look like, and they need to know from this minister and from this government what they can expect within those regulations. I truly believe that all of our retailers across this province will be very cooperative as they go through this process, and I'm hopeful that the minister will give them the guidance that they do need outside of this amendment. I'm pleased that the minister has indicated that he has been speaking with First Nations leaders and consulting with them, and how important it is to help First Nations people and members of the Aboriginal communities to also deal with the dark side of smoking, and help them go through these transitions as well. I was a little bit disappointed when I did hear that consultation process didn't happen prior to the amendment coming forward, and perhaps I may have had some misinformation, and I'm hoping that that's not the case, that consultation with our First Nations leaders actually took place before this amendment was made. And I have no doubt in my mind that members of the First Nations communities are very interested in working together with the minister in helping them look at ways that they can also deal with the removal of power walls and advertisements for the tobacco companies. Another point I want to bring up is the fact that so many people have worked hard at seeing this legislation move forward. And the folks from Smoke-Free Nova Scotia have been working diligently over the last year or so to ensure that we do have all of the correct information. And I know that they have provided much in the way of presentations over the past year to the minister and to his department in making sure that he fully understood the necessity of putting this legislation in place. And so to the people at Smoke-Free Nova Scotia and the Canadian Cancer Society, we owe much gratitude for their work and their dedication and their commitment to their cause. And this has certainly helped all of us here in Nova Scotia, and certainly our young people who are so susceptible. I also want to say as well that it's given this opportunity to speak to this issue is something that I'm pleased to be here on. And as I said, as an ex-smoker, it's something that I am very passionate about in ensuring that young people are not picking up this habit. I want to turn the floor over to my colleague, and I again thank you, and I look forward to seeing this bill move forward to law amendments, and I thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to, for a few minutes, go over a few points on this bill, Bill number 62, the Tobacco Access Act. I don't think, probably, I don't know, maybe there will be, by the time this session comes to an end, a more important piece of legislation that we could possibly be dealing with in this legislature than we are right now. And I want to congratulate the minister on taking this step. And I want to add, and the minister knows because I think Nova Scotians recognize the minister's prowess as a hockey player, okay, is certainly well known in this province. But he would also know that as a hockey player, when you score the go-ahead goal, you don't sit back. You don't wait for the other team to catch up. And I think that's a fairly good analogy to make here now. We've gone ahead, but it's not the time now to sit back and wait for that other team to catch up. Now is the time to score a couple of more goals, Mr. Minister, and make sure that we've got this one in the bag and that we take home the win. And I think this gives us the opportunity to do exactly that. You know, to take away those power walls had to be done. It certainly had to be done because we know what those power walls did, and we know who they did it to. We know that they attracted and were most effective with the youth of our community, and we know that. So we've put in these restrictions now. It's the most important message that we could give to the youth of our community, that we don't like them taking up the deadly act of smoking, and we're recognizing that. We also have to recognize that, and I'm talking about the extra goals, Mr. Minister, here, is that the extra goals are prevention and education. We know we can't let down our guard right now, and that we have to increase in those areas. I know the minister is fully aware of that. And I know that he understands that those are areas that we have to keep our guard up in. I know that as he has and as the previous speaker has, we have to thank people like our community health boards. And the member for Queens said Smoke-Free Nova Scotia, the Canadian Cancer Society, and the volunteers who have worked hard to make us aware of how important this was and to move forward with this legislation. Because again, we have to remember, don't forget, the power walls are gone, but that's not It's not the cigarettes that are gone. The cigarettes are still being sold in corner stores. Cigarettes are still being sold in this province. Underage youth are still buying cigarettes in this province, and we still have a little bit of a problem on our hands. The enforcement, I know the minister mentioned the number of compliance acts. I'm sorry, I forget the phrase that exactly he used. The appliance officers. Compliance officers, not appliance. The Minister of Community Service Nova Scotia gave me the wrong information there, Mr. Speaker. They're compliance officers, but the numbers that are there perhaps could be increased as a suggestion to the minister. You know, if we're getting serious about this, and again, if we're not taking this for granted, if we're not sitting back on that lead and sitting on that lead, then we have to become even more vigilant. We have to become better at what we're doing. And in this case, that means let's take a look at the next step and what's out there. But again, Mr. Speaker, you know, to further limit the access to tobacco for young people, to eliminate the temptation of those smoking ads that were there whenever they walked in, it makes sense. It's the right thing to do. It certainly has our support. And again, on behalf of our caucus, congratulations to the minister and his government for taking this very worthwhile step forward in this battle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As someone with a lifelong dedication to the health profession, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about this bill today. And I want to thank Smoke-Free Nova Scotia for their advocacy in helping our Minister of Health Promotion and Protection and our government lead the way in this very important component of tobacco strategy. And I want to thank the Honourable Minister for bringing this bill forward. Many countries around the world, including Canada, have restricted or banned traditional forms of tobacco advertising. So in response to this, tobacco manufacturers made point-of-sale advertising one of their main marketing tools. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Nunavut, Northwest Territories, Ontario, and PEI all have legislation that bans or will ban point-of-sale tobacco advertising. And I'm very pleased to say to add Nova Scotia to that list. We all know point-of-sale advertising increases the amount of tobacco sold and the number of people who smoke. Sure, it's known to increase impulse buys by smokers who feel the need to have a package of cigarettes on them at all times, but they will buy them whether they see them or not. It won't be difficult. It's the thought of not having them on them that creates that panic. I better get some before I run out, and there are lots of reasons why smokers buy cigarettes. And I think point-of-sale advertising is more of a significant trigger for ex-smokers or those who have just quit to restart or those even thinking about taking it up. I was very fortunate in that I've never smoked in my life, but I know many who have smoked for years have started when they were young because they thought it was a cool thing to do. Now, I remember one friend telling me a story about when she quit and how she did it, and I distinctly remember her saying that the hardest part of going into any corner store and looking at all the packages behind the counter as she paid for her purchases. Funny, she says she never noticed them when she smoked except to tell the cashier point out her brand as she was buying them. After she stopped smoking, though, she made the point of telling me that when she noticed how colorful and bright the cigarette packages were. Before that, the packages almost looked like candy, and was very surprised at just how many packages stores stocked behind the counter and made visible. Now she admits, as a smoker, she never thought it was a big deal. And when she thought about it, she thought smoking must have dulled her senses, her taste, her smell, and sight because the packages were simply colorless at the time. The other thing that was going on is that she didn't realize at the time was just how much tobacco companies were stepping up their efforts with regards to building these power walls. And by 2005, Canadian tobacco companies, as the minister spoke and others, over $100 million was being spent on the right to advertise cigarettes in retail stores. In 2001, as mentioned earlier, $74 million, over 25% increase. Well, needless to say, my friend did come to her senses, as she tells me, and today she credits our government and its anti-tobacco legislation time and time again because she says she was one of the ones who needed the barriers. The more barriers, the better. Since she quit, and she's never felt better for doing it. She's one of the many thousands of people who quit smoking since the government unveiled their first piece of tobacco strategy in 2001, aimed at getting Nova Scotians to stop smoking, or refusing to start, and she did so using several of these supports that our government set up, in combination with her own will to do that. Out of sight, out of mind will certainly help other smokers who are doing everything they can to stop this life-draining habit. Because she's only one person, an adult, who knew better, who knew the disgusting aspects of smoking, who knew what it was like to wake up with a cough in the morning, who smelled of smoke on her own clothes, who saw the nicotine on her teeth, and who was out of breath doing almost nothing. And she hated that, and she still had a hard time quitting. These huge tobacco displays in virtually every convenience store, supermarket, gas station encourage youth who don't know that better. Everyone smokes. It's promoted. They make use of the tobacco products appear normal, and they also make tobacco products appear safe. As a result, another big impact of point-of-sale tobacco advertising is encouraging youth to start smoking, and this is just wrong. Our children should simply be not exposed to tobacco advertising. Since Smoke-Free Nova Scotia launched its advocacy campaign on point-of-sale legislation in May, I have received many calls and letters, emails from constituents, even from people who do not live in Hants West, asking to support this legislation, and I will do just that. My constituency office has also been getting updates from Smoke-Free Nova Scotia regularly with the names of individuals from Hants West who've signed and supported the online petition, and there are many, 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 many names, including my own and my wife's name. And I won't take the time today to read them, but I have them here, and there are many of them, as I said. I have a friend, Donna Haverstock from Sackville, a former colleague. I know Donna from days working as a paramedic for Emergency Health Services. She now works as the asthma COP educator at Cobequid Health Centre, and she travels to the Health and Wellness Center in North Preston and Duffus Health Center. She writes and she says, as a mother of 2 sons, I don't want them exposed to easy access tobacco products, out of sight, out of mind, or whatever it takes to make the purchase of tobacco products difficult. She's not saying that you can't smoke, but if you do, price and availability should be a deterrent. And I don't live in your area, she states, Chuck, but please vote yes for point-of-sale legislation. She also went on to say the honourable member from Sackville-Cobequid and I, we used to work together a number of years ago, and if we ever ran together in the same neighborhood, I would still be the MLA today. Donna's a great person. But one thing, Mr. Speaker, on a serious note, that her letter did remind me of is that I'm very pleased that our government has all-party support of this legislation, and I thank the other members for supporting it positively, including the honourable member from Sackville-Cobequid. He and I both know how smoking affects families, not necessarily just those that are smoking in the family, but the results of secondhand smoke and the sicknesses like asthma and other respiratory problems that it creates. Mr. Speaker, healthcare workers deal with smoke-related emergencies every day in this province. We go on at length in this House about the rising cost of healthcare. Mr. Speaker, and we are being asked every day, what are we going to do about it? Well, Mr. Speaker, this piece of legislation is a step in the right direction and will certainly have an impact on reducing the number of visits to emergency rooms, reducing the need for long stays and surgeries. It's clearly marked right on the packages. Cigarette smoke is harmful to your health. It's time to stop marketing such a product, one that kills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to start as well by congratulating the minister and his department staff, Smoke-Free Nova Scotia, and all those who have worked so hard to get this legislation onto the floor of this legislature in this session. Mr. Speaker, I was thinking as the last speaker was on his feet of all of the changes that we have seen in this legislature over the time that I've been here. You know, I've seen in 8.5 years some positive and some negative things. And certainly if I was to think about the positive things, the progress that has been made with respect to reducing the harm that's associated with tobacco use is probably one of the most significant changes that we've made in this legislature, and I am very pleased to have been here for that and to have been able to participate in those debates. You know, Mr. Speaker, not to take everybody down memory lane, but remember how hard the pharmacies fought not so long ago to have tobacco removed from pharmacies. That was, I think, one of the first things that happened in terms of this movement toward implementing a tobacco strategy. And I don't think any of us here will forget, you know, the long days and evenings that we spent in the Law Amendments Committee when the Smoke-Free Public Places Act was first introduced, an act that has subsequently been toughened up and amended, removing smoking in those areas that had been exempted under the first piece of legislation. So this is, I think this is very significant in terms of the progress that we have made. I think it's not so long ago that I had an opportunity one day during question period to stand in my place and provide some pictures of children's videos being sold right alongside those huge tobacco walls in some of the large shopping grocery stores. So, Mr. Speaker, anything that we can do, I think, to denormalize and take tobacco out of the reach, out of the consciousness of people, as my colleague from Hants West was saying, people who are trying to quit smoking find it very difficult when they go into a shop and they're confronted by those huge walls of tobacco products. And young people, they tend to see the advertising, which is why the tobacco industry has devoted so many millions of dollars, as a product that is, you know, it's attractive. It reflects maturity to be able to have access to tobacco, and so this is significant. I want to reflect on one of the sadder things, I think, that in the process of working on legislative change. Heather Crow the activist, the woman who was a waitress, who was exposed to secondhand smoke for many years, never smoked herself, never was a smoker, who developed lung disease, was a litigant, I think, made some significant differences in workers' compensation legislation in the province of Ontario. She died recently. And I think about legislation like this and the role that a person like Heather, who really took her situation and laid it out there to have the public identify with the fundamental unfairness, I guess, of having these huge corporations be able to use the profits that they make at the expense of the ordinary person and turn it back and really generate an ongoing supply of human carnage for their insatiable appetites to reap profits for their shareholders. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very good piece of legislation. If it will prevent that next generation of smokers from coming forward, then we will have, I think, done a great service to our healthcare system, our children, their families, our communities, and to our province in the long run. So again, the minister, his staff, Smoke Free Nova Scotia, and others who have worked so hard should be commended. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if you would like adjournment of this debate or it goes back, but I will take my place at this point.
Are there further speakers? I'll recognize the Minister to close the debate. The Honourable the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to close debate. I want to thank those who have spoke during the last few minutes with respect to Bill 62. I said to some people one time when speaking that imagine 1,800 people dying on the roads of Nova Scotia and how the public would be outraged and they'd be demanding us to immediately do something to improve the health and the safety of our roads. And as legislators, we would do that. We would take our place and we would do what we have to do to improve the road safety. This is what we're doing now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one more quick thing before I close debate. If we can't pass this piece of legislation for our family and friends who have passed away as a result of smoking or secondhand smoking, we have to do it for our children and our family and friends who are here with us today and the people that we love. So that's why we need to pass this bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Motion before the House is for a second reading on Bill number 62. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 62, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 14 of the Acts of 1993, the Tobacco Access Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would move that the House now adjourn until tomorrow, to meet at 9 a.m. in the morning and to conduct business until 12 noon. The government order of business will be public bills for second reading, and we'll be calling the amendments to the Securities Act for government business tomorrow.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at the hour of 9 a.m. The House will sit tomorrow between 9 a.m. and 12 noon. Is it agreed? Those against? Motion carried. We have arrived at the moment of interruption. Tonight's late debate has been submitted by the member from Dartmouth North. Therefore, it be resolved that this government consult with communities about their own rural economic development. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's very important that I rise here tonight and discuss a very important issue, and that being that communities need to be consulted on their own rural economic development. And I bring this to the floor this evening because of developments that are happening in my own community. And yesterday I had asked questions of the Minister of Aquaculture in regards to a fish farm development happening in Port Mattoon Bay. I also tabled a petition with well over 1,800 signatures of members of my communities that are very concerned about this particular development happening. And this simply isn't a case of a not in my backyard syndrome. This is clearly a case for residents in my communities that feel that they have been slighted, that they have not been consulted in their own initiatives around